Awesome. Thank you, Bethany. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming to listen to Custom Forms. I'm excited to have this webinar today. For those of you who haven't come to our webinars before, we do these pretty much monthly on a variety of different topics. All of the old webinars are available to you inside of the system in download documents if you want to go looking for them. And we're excited to get feedback from you all about how this goes and what sorts of topics you want to see in the future. So today we are going to talk about custom forms. So that's me. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Micah. I am the HCM consulting manager here at Bergen KDV, and I am going to take you through a variety of things today. We are going to talk about some common uses for custom forms. We are going to talk through how to create custom forms, as well as how to assign them out to employees or have employees initiate them. We'll also talk a little bit about some additional available resources if you want to learn more about how to do custom forms yourself. And we'll definitely have some time at the end for Q&A. I think this will be a somewhat brief topic of some of these webinars. So for starters, let's talk about what are custom forms and what sorts of things can you use them for. So a custom form inside the system is really just that. Anytime you're not using a standardized part of the system, a governmental form like a W-4 that's maintained, at a global level, some common uses are sort of two main buckets. One are things where you need employees to sign off for something. So handbook acknowledgement and policy acknowledgement are big uses of custom forms. We see that a lot for clients where they need employees to sign off on receiving something and acknowledge that. The other most common use of custom forms are things where you want to collect some information that doesn't really fit into the system anywhere. So I see a lot of it with new hires where you may have a getting to know you form where you ask about their favorite food or how they like to be recognized or something like that. And so you maybe have a form that they're filling out today. You could build that out as a custom form and have them fill it out electronically. Supplemental material for changes. So I've got clients where they may have a direct deposit action that the employee goes through to update their direct deposits, but they also have an acknowledgement that they want the employee to sign as part of signing up for direct deposit. So they may have an HR action for the actual direct deposit change and a custom form for the sign off or the acknowledgement. Also, I've got tuition reimbursement listed up here, but other just sort of general, data collection. I've seen it for people signing up for wellness programs that maybe don't fit into the bucket of benefits. I have seen it used for tuition reimbursement programs. Like I say, anywhere that you're having an employee fill out a form and turn it into you or turn it into their supervisor or turn it into payroll that maybe just doesn't quite fit inside of what you would normally store in the system, or there isn't a good field to store it in the system. So on the other side of ways that you might use custom forms, what are some situations where you might not use custom forms or where you might use something else instead? So one of those is an HR action. And so for those of you who are maybe newer to the platform, an HR action is where an employee can go in and make changes to their information, and it goes through a workflow to get approved. Direct deposit changes and address changes are probably our most common HR action. You can do a lot of those same things on a custom form. So one great example is, I've got a client that has a custom form for employee name changes. You could do that through an HR action instead. The form works better for them because they have some additional information they want to communicate, and it didn't really fit inside the box of an HR action. But that's one thing to consider, is whether a form really makes sense or whether an HR action makes sense. In general, my rule of thumb is if you are trying to change something in the system, an HR action is probably going to be better. And if you're just trying to collect something, then a custom form is probably going to be better. It's never 100% one way or another, but do evaluate some of those. Other places where you may want to not use a custom form potentially are is there another module in the system that is actually built to do this thing? And have you evaluated whether that's going to fit? So I listed a couple up here: incidents, performance reviews, employee surveys. These are all things I've seen custom forms used for all of these, for disciplinary incidents and performance reviews and surveys, that also have modules on the HR system to accommodate those. Again, depending on your situation, like take incidents as an example. One of my clients, the system incidents tool wasn't flexible enough to accommodate all of the information that they wanted to collect, so they're using a custom form. Other folks, using the actual incident tool inside the system might be just as effective and a little bit cleaner. So as you're thinking about setting up forms, think about whatever maybe already exists in the system. The third category is governmental forms. If the system maintains a W-4 or an EEO form or something like that, you probably don't want to reinvent the wheel, because those are maintained by the software developers, and so you don't want to have to create work for yourself to have to update forms that you don't need to update. And the last sort of case where you maybe don't want to use a custom form is just if the form is overly complex. And what does that mean? It varies. There is no limit to the number of things that you can put onto a custom form. I tend to find if you start to collect over 15, 20 fields of information, it sometimes isn't the easiest experience on the employee as they're filling it out, because the boxes on the form can get small or hard to type in, or things can get mushed together depending on the layout of the form. So, if it's a really complicated form, it maybe is not the best suited, but it may. So again, none of these are absolute no's, but they're things to consider as you're kind of evaluating if custom forms are the right choice for you. So with that, let's talk about how to set up and use custom forms. So I'm gonna switch my screen here to this one. There we go. So you can all see my system screen. I'm logged in as an administrator. Excuse me. So custom form setup is going to happen under the admin tab, the gear icon here, and under HR setup and custom forms. Or you can type custom forms into the search box and get yourself there that way, whatever works out for you. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to hit a button, add new, and you have to give your form a name. That's all you have to give it to get started. We're going to call this webinar sample. There's a couple other things you can pick. One is you can put in a description. This is visible to employees filling out the form, so do put some thought into what you put in that box. You can indicate if the form is active and available to folks to use right away, or if you want to make it inactive for the moment. You can define if it's an applicant form. So if you are using the applicant tracking system, you can set up different forms that are available only to applicants. This is a hard toggle. So if a form is an applicant form, it is available only to applicants. If it is an employee form, it is available only to employees. So you can't use one form for both groups. You would have to create two different forms. You can copy them though. So if you've got something like an informational form that you want to give out to applicants, but you also want to put in the new hire kit, you can just copy a custom form. The other thing you can define here in the initial screen is whether there's a workflow attached to the form. This is useful if the form needs to go to multiple people. So if the employee fills something out and then a supervisor has to fill out part of it, or if after the employee signs, HR needs to sign, you can set up a workflow to route the form through the business. And then you can also define some fonts and font sizes by default. You can change all of these after the fact. None of this is locked in stone. Once you hit save, then the system will refresh this page. Did I hit save? There we go. And give you a screen for pages. So you have a couple of different options for creating the forms. The easiest thing to do, especially if you're duplicating an existing form that you're using, is going to be this button to upload a PDF document. So I can click on that. I'm going to browse out here to my desktop and upload this safety acknowledgement form that I've been using in the past. It's going to think for a second and populate that. And then I'm going to say OK. And then what it'll do is it'll create a page. And if I go in here to the pencil, to the edit icon, it's put in my PDF of the form that I've been using, and I can start from that. If I want to, go back here, I can do add a new page. So now I've got page 2 here that is completely blank, and I can type into it and I can do all of the fields. But in general, I'm gonna go ahead and delete that. The upload PDF is really a great way to go because it lets you get a jump start. And like I say, in most situations, you are probably duplicating a form that you already have in a hard copy. You've got a Word document, you've got a PDF, so being able to upload that is really a way to sort of jumpstart the process. So once you've got your page set up, whether you've uploaded it or not, it's time to start adding new fields. And there's 2 different ways to do that. The first one is pretty obvious. You click the Add New Field button. And it's going to create a new field up here in the corner, and it's going to create an entry on the list over here. And we'll go through this. And when you click Edit, you've got all the options for this field. And I'll go through those in just a second. The other way you can create a new field is you can just right-click with your mouse over here on the form, so wherever you want it. So if I know I'm going to have a field over here, I can just right-click above the date. I'm going to get a pop-up that asks me what kind of field I want it to be. And then it's going to create new field number 2 right where I was clicking. And I can kind of drag it around to where I need it to be. So let's go back to what sort of information you can put in these fields. So I'm going to go back to new field 1. I can start to edit a field either by clicking the pencil icon over here in the field list, or by double clicking the field on the form. And you'll know which one you're editing because it'll change colors compared to all the other fields in the form. Once you have a field selected, you can move it around as I showed over here. You can drag it using that. You can also resize it. So you get the arrows and you can stretch it out to make it however big you want it to be. Put that down here. You can also resize it using and move it using the width and position indicators here at the bottom of the settings. This is nice. I am not a particularly detailed person, confession time, right? But a lot of folks are, and they want to make sure that all of these fields on forms line up exactly. And I appreciate that, and I love their diligence. So you can set it. So if you want to have another field, so when I hit save here, we can see that this is in position 80 and 409. And if I want to move this one over here so that it lines up exactly with this one, I could set the Y value to 409. And it'll line up exactly with the other field. So you can use these to make sure that everything is exactly lined up the way that you want it. Like I say, you can also just kind of drag and drop if you are a more, fly by the seat of your pants sort of person. A couple other settings I want to talk through here. Most of these are pretty self-explanatory, but I do want to explain how they work inside of forms. So read only is just that. If the field is informational and you don't want the employee to be able to type anything in it, you're going to check the read only box. Is required is going to make sure that there is a value in the field before it's submitted, or it won't let the employee submit the form without doing that. The name field shows up in reports. So if you were, say, doing a wellness form where an employee was signing up for a wellness program, you'll want to make sure that these names make sense, because you can run a report on everything that's entered into custom field forms. But if you leave them as new field 1, new field 2, new field 3, your report isn't going to be particularly useful because you're just going to have all these values. You want to make sure that the name is something that's going to make sense when you report it out later. It doesn't have any real impact on filling out the form. It's more about, reporting the information back out later. The other big choice you have is the type in terms of what is this field going to contain. There are a lot of choices here, and I'm not going to go through all of them because a number of them are self-explanatory. Characters and currency and time and date. But I do want to talk about a few of these and highlight a couple of specific examples and what they do and where you may and may not want to use them. So the first one is system account. So what the system account field does is it lets whoever's filling out the form choose another employee that they have access to in the system. So it'll bring up a window where you can pick an employee, filter that list, and put their information into this box. It is restricted based on employee security and group access in terms of who they can see. So a typical employee, if you give them a system account field, they're only going to see themselves. If you give it to a supervisor, however, for example, they'll see everyone on their team and be able to pick who it's for. So this can be a nice way to kind of jumpstart some of the data entry if it's someone who has enough access to pick other employees. A couple other highlights. So text area is basically a big box that the employee can fill in. This is if you're trying to get, again, my example, if you were doing a performance review and you wanted to give them a big text box to fill in, as opposed to the character option up here, which is just going to be, a smaller field and isn't going to have as many formatting tools. So if you're just looking for a short answer, I would always use characters. If you're looking for a lengthy answer, I would look more at text area. The other specialty fields, one of them is employee. So when I click this, you're going to see it opens up a new field down here called field that has a whole bunch of choices on it. What this does is it's going to pull information from the employee record for whoever is filling out the form. So in this example, since I've got a field down here called employee printed name, I don't really need the employee to fill in their name, right? I can use this employee field and I can pick full name. And so when the form gets created, this new field 1 is going to populate with the employee's full name and they won't have to do anything. Using these employee fields is great, but there is a cautionary part of this. A lot of them you may want to set to read only, because if you allow the employees to edit these fields, when the form gets processed, that field will change to whatever is on the form. So depending on your use case, that may be good or bad. So like I said, I've got a client who has a custom form for name changes, for example. So they have the employee field and they have it populated, say, with first name. When they open the form, it's going to default to their current first name. If the employee types a new value in, once that form is processed and approved, it will change the first name field in the employee record to whatever was on this form. For them, that's by design. If you're trying to do it on something like this, that's a handbook sign-off, you don't want the employee to be able to change their name on this form. So you may use the full name field, but you're going to want to check the read-only box to make sure that the employee doesn't inadvertently change information that's important. So that's my cautionary tale about the employee field. A couple other highlights. Sign. This is where you're going to indicate that this is a signature field and the employee or their manager or someone else needs to sign the form. Label is a text box that you create. You can see that the read-only box is pre-checked. So in the case where, say I didn't upload a PDF and I was just starting with that blank page, I would use this label field to create this big block of text up here and fill it out. And the last one I want to talk about is date submitted versus date. So the date field is going to let the employee fill out a date, whereas the date submitted field is going to automatically populate with the date the employee signs the form and they won't have to enter that in. So if you want the employee to indicate a date, you're going to use the date field. If you're trying to get date signed, you're going to use date submitted. So those are kind of the highlights in terms of fields. So let's go ahead and sort of configure my form that I'm getting started here. So I've got my printed name. I'm going to go back and I'm going to pick my employee section and full name. I'm going to save that just so that I see it. I can give it a label. So this will be a label that shows up on the form off to the side of the box. I can also give it a default value depending on the form that I pick. But in a lot of cases, especially when you're filling out a PDF, you don't really need the labels because the labels are already part of your PDF. All right, let's make that a little bit wider. So it's got some space there. That's good. I'm going to move my date field. We'll call this date signed. And I'm going to use that date submitted option because I don't really need the employee to fill out a date. I want to know when they process this form. So I'm going to use date submitted. And then my last box on this one is I need the employee signature. So I'm going to right click to add a form. I'm just going to skip right to sign. And it's going to create this field for me. You'll see though that even if you do the right click from this side, you can still change it to whatever you want. You're not locked in. I'm going to have it signed by the employee. Make that a little bigger so it looks nice. If I feel pretty good about this, up here under the 3-dot menu, you've got an option to preview, so you can kind of see what the form is going to look like when the employee gets it. And if I feel pretty good about that, oh, I forgot to give this a name. I also probably should make the signature required because that's kind of the whole point of the form, right? Like we don't want them to submit it without filling it. If I've got that all set to go, then I am ready to allow employees to have access to the form. This is the part that I think gets missed most on custom forms as anybody's setting them up, whether it's our clients doing it themselves, whether it's us internally. If we're going to forget something, it's the security step. I can guarantee it. So when you set up a custom form, you still have to tell the system who's able to use it. And there's 2 places you can do that. So the first one is back here at the beginning of the form. So if we go back to admin, HR setup, custom forms, and I go into my webinar sample here. There's a button up here called Apply Security. If I click that, it's going to think for a minute because it's going to pull together all of your available security profiles and let you set them all at once. You can also set up the access in each security profile, and I'll show you that here in just a second. But this is definitely the way that I recommend doing it because it lets you access it all at one time. So here you'll see whatever security profiles you happen to have existing, and you've got the HR tab and the ESS tab. And for those of you who haven't worked in security profiles before, the HR tab refers to what someone can do as a manager or an administrator, and the ESS is for employee self-service. This is what employees can do themselves. So on my policy sign off here, I'm going to say, you know, I want managers to be able to view the form, but they don't need to edit it. So I'm going to check off all of those. My payroll admin, though, they probably need to be able to do all these things as a manager. On the employee side, on the employee self-service, I want employees to be able to view the form, and I want them to be able to edit the form, but I don't necessarily want them to create their own or add them or delete them. There's also this hide from available tab unless assigned. And what this does is determines whether an employee can use this form outside of when it's assigned to them. So for example, if this is on a new hire checklist, you know, you probably don't need this available for them to sign anytime. If it's something like a tuition reimbursement, that's been my go-to example today, that one you want the employee to be able to initiate on demand. It's not going to be assigned to them to create. So you wouldn't want to hide it from them in that case. But something like this safety policy sign off, I'm probably going to hide it from the employees because it's not really something that they need to deal with in and out of their daily lives. So I'm going to hit save there. If you don't do the security access, then when you get assigned the form and the employee goes into the to-do, they're going to get an error that says, you don't have access to this form. And so this is always the sort of the first troubleshooting step, is make sure that the form is actually assigned to folks. The other place that you can adjust this security is inside the security profile. So if you go under Admin, Profiles and Policies, and Security. So we'll look again at our employee security here. There is a section on both the Employee Self-Service, the ESS tab, as well as the HR tab for these custom forms. So like if we go to the ESS tab, we scroll down a ways, here's My Custom Forms. So here's this webinar sample that we just made, and we can see the changes that we just did in that Apply Security screen. So if you only need to edit one security profile, you can do it from here in the security profile. But if you're setting up a form new, I definitely recommend using that Apply Security button on the form, or otherwise you're gonna have to go into each and every security profile and update the settings. And that's a pain, and nobody wants to do that. All right, so we've got our form, we've given employees access to it, and so the last part is, how do they get it? How do they have the ability to fill out this form? And there's 4 ways to do it. So the first one is if the employee has the ability to add a form themselves, and you didn't check that hide box, they can go initiate it themselves. So if they go under the My Info menu, My HR, Forms, and Other Forms, they're going to see all of the custom forms that they have available to them. I'm a super user, so I can create this webinar form for myself. I click add, it's going to pop it right open for me. You can see the date sign's pre-populated today. My name is filled in. I can just hit the sign button and I'm good to go. The other option is if a manager wants to assign the form to them, it's a really similar process. So under the team menu and HR and Forms and Other Forms, they have the same list potentially, but instead of an add button, it's an assign button. And in that case, they're going to get a list of employees that they can search through. They're going to pick who to assign it to. And then when they save that, it's going to get assigned to that employee and they'll get it to do to fill out the form. However, those are both great, but the most common ways to actually use the custom forms are going to be in HR Actions and inside of checklists. So I want to talk about those quick here as well. Those both live under Admin, HR Setup. I'm going to start with checklists first, because this is probably where we see the most use of custom forms, because again, things like handbook sign-offs and policy sign-offs, getting to know you new hire forms, all of those make sense as part of the new hire checklist. So as you come into your checklist, plug for our prior webinar about how to set up checklists if you want to get more in depth about how this all works. But you'll have an option here to add checklist item. There is one for custom forms. So I'm going to put that into my form section, hit the little flag to add that. And then when I scroll down here, I can see one that's not configured, and I'll hit the pencil. And from here, I can choose whatever custom form I want. I'm going to go grab my webinar sample form that I created. The thing that I do want to make sure that you know is, because it's a little hidden, for checklists, you want to check the Allow Update Manually, because that'll open up this second option that says Mark Complete on Submit. And you want to check that off, because that way when an employee submits a form in their checklist, it will automatically mark that as done. They don't have to go back and check off that they finished it, and they don't have to wait for the workflow to finish if there's a workflow associated with it. So do make sure that you're using these two settings if you have custom forms in checklists. So this is really easy. You just pull it into the custom, the checklist this way, sorry. Hit save. And then The next time I assign this checklist out to somebody, they'll have this custom form, they'll fill it out there on the screen. If there's a workflow attached to the custom form, that'll kick off then when they submit it. The other primary use of custom forms is inside of HR actions. So I talked about, I've got some clients that maybe have a direct deposit change, but they have an authorization form that they want the employee to sign at the same time, as an example. So inside your HR action, again, let me see, I think it's the tuition reimbursement. You can add an item. Again, there's a choice for form, custom form. The setup is very simple. You just pick the form and choose if normal security applies, whatever you set up on the form, or if you're going to override the security restrictions and let the employee fill out whatever. And they're going to save that. And then now when they do the HR action, they maybe fill out their training section and they fill out the tuition reimbursement form at the same time. And then they can both go get approved. So the last thing I want to show you is a quick look at reporting and then some other resources. So if you're looking for information about custom forms, so we talked about how you're going to assign them under team, HR forms, custom forms, and other forms. If you want to see those, what people filled out, so we talked about how you want to make sure you give things good names. It's a little buried. So if you go into submitted, well, maybe I don't have any, let's see here. There we go. So if we go into submitted, you can see the forms that have been processed. Their workflows are done. But what if you wanted to see what values were actually put on these forms? So the 3-dot menu on the action item for the form request, this is the leave request. There's an option here for view detail report. And what this will do is it will open up a normal system report, but it will show you exactly what people filled out on the custom form. So you can see here, I didn't follow my own advice. This one's called new field 3. So I don't know what that was supposed to be. And I've got one just labeled checkbox. So I don't know what they were supposed to do. So I did a bad job at setting up these forms because this report isn't helpful to me. But you can get a report of all of the fields that are populated on these custom forms. And then you can save this and schedule it and do whatever else you would with a regular report. So I do like to highlight that this is here because it is a little bit buried and difficult to find, but it's there and it's super helpful. The last thing I want to mention in terms of additional resources is there are some great trainings about custom forms. There's one about creating custom forms. There's one about adding list items to custom forms out under Learning Center. And so that's going to be under your My Info and Help and Learning Center. So go take a look at that. If you have questions about custom forms after, that's going to be a great resource. And as always, of course, if you need assistance, you can reach out to the support team. And we'll be happy to either set up forms for you or help you through the first couple that you do so you get comfortable with it. And with that, I think we're at our Q&A portion. Bethany, do we have any questions that have come in?
Sounds great. We do have a couple that came in here, Micah. The first one, do you have to purchase something to set up forms or is it already available to us?
It is, it depends. So if you have the HR module, the full custom form functionality is available. There is a limited version of custom forms available with timekeeping because you can do some custom forms around leave of absence and some other things. But if you have the HR module, it is fully included with the HR module.
Great, thank you. This one's kind of a specific example, but I thought maybe you could show if there is a way to do this. This one's asking, we reimburse our employees 50% for shoes that they purchase for work, safety shoes. Is there a way to have a custom form where the employee would attach a photo of the receipt? And if so, could that be restricted to, say, like per once a year? Is there a way to do that?
I think I would combine this form then into an HR action. This is a great example. So I'm going to go over and take a look at HR actions. And so we have this, we'll go back to my tuition request that I started here. So you can add an action item to an HR action for an upload. So you could have your custom form here in an HR action, and they fill out the form with the information. And then you could have an upload where they would attach the photo of their receipt to the HR action. And then as it flows through, you would see both the form and the receipt come through at the same time. I don't know that you could restrict the employee from turning it in more than once. If it's something that they do sort of on demand, like you would have it here in their My HR and they would start it whenever they want. You can't restrict that. If it's every April we're doing this for everybody, you could assign it out to everyone and not let them start it themselves and control it that way. But if it's something that it's sort of throughout the year, whenever the employee does it, there's not a systematic way to do that. It would probably just be relying on a report to see when they did it last.
Great,
But that's
thank
a good
you.
question. I love that use, yeah.
Yeah. The next one here, somebody's asking why they might not have the HR actions under settings.
It could be a permissions issue for you. So I would say reach out to support about that one. Or if you're the administrator, reach out to support. If there's someone else in your organization who's the administrator, maybe check with them first. But it's likely a permissions issue if you don't see the HR actions available to you.
Great, thank you. And for anyone else here too, if there are follow-up questions, like Micah said, reaching out to support, you can email payroll@bergenkdv.com and they can create a ticket and help you out with that. The next one here, Micah, and if anyone else wants to submit a question here while we're live, feel free. For the checkbox, can you have 3 boxes that only allow one to be selected?
I wish. No, the checkbox is a single item. So what they're asking is, so inside the custom form, as you're setting it up, you can create a field that is a checkbox. And so like as we preview, let me save this here. So as we preview, you get a checkbox here that the employee can check or not. But if you wanted, 3 different checkboxes to go there, you would have 3 separate checkbox fields, checkbox 1, 2, and 3. And so there's not at this point a way to prevent the employee from checking all of them, unfortunately. That's a great question.
Got it, thank you. The next one here, could you show us what it looks like to the applicant or the employee when they are assigned a custom form?
Yeah, let me go see. Did I actually assign myself that form? I'm April. Oh, my bears. All right, so let me see if this shows up in my to-dos. I might not have a notification set up in this. So I would say put your name on the survey that you get after that with this question, and we'll follow up with you directly and show you what it's going to look like. But my demo isn't set up to show that.
Okay, great, thank you. Yep, I have the information for who submitted that, so we'll pass along.
We'll reach out to you later.
Awesome. Getting a couple around either how do we know if we have the full HR module or how do we get information about the HR module? Could you provide a little bit of clarity, maybe if there is somebody who wants to do a deeper dive into this and maybe they only have timekeeping?
Absolutely. So if you don't have the HR module at all and you want to know more about it, again, put in a ticket to support and we will get one of our business consultants to reach out and tell you what that's all about. To see if you have it or not, really the answer is if you go under the admin menu and you see this HR setup tab, then at least the core module is turned on, which is where custom forms live. So you may have some different options in here, but if you see this HR setup tab but not custom forms and not HR actions, that's probably a permission thing. If you don't see this HR setup tab under admin, that probably means you don't have that particular module turned on and you'd want to reach out to us.
Great, thank you. The next one here, Micah, I don't know if you can do this from the demo that you are at, but somebody's asking about where the recording will be from today. And then I thought maybe you could show where the other recordings are if you have access to that.
Yeah, I think I can. So under my info and help, there's a section here for download documentation. I think my demo can see it all. We'll find out. I'll wait for it to load here. So download documentation is where we put sort of all of our general documents. We try to get really clever with the names, and they all have webinar in the title. Yeah, so all of our old webinars are going to be here in download documents. We've got one from ACA and one from open enrollment, and this category of webinars is the more general one. So we've got accruals and payroll tips and tricks. That's a two-parter. We've got one specific to HR actions. We've got an older custom forum webinar from last year. Oh, 2 years ago. Oh my goodness. So maybe don't watch that one. We'll replace that with this one. But yeah, all of those should be out here in download documents. And if you don't see those, again, reach out to support because it's probably a permissions issue versus anything else.
Great, thank you. And then the next one here, this was another kind of a custom or a specific question, but can a manager initiate a custom form that an employee might need to sign off on? Say it was something that they're like deducting from payroll and they would need the employee to sign off on that. Could the manager be involved in that process?
They can, yeah. It requires a little bit of adjustment to permissions. If the way custom forms like to work is they like the employee to fill out the form and then it to go to the manager to sign. If it starts with the manager filling out the form and then going to the employee to sign, we can do that, but we do have to make some adjustments to permissions to make sure that the employee can sign it second. But yes, absolutely.
Great, thank you. And then again, I do just want to share the payroll email here. You can email payroll@bergenkdv.com, and that's for anything for payroll, KPay support. Micah, do you have anything else you'd like to say in closing? I don't see any other questions coming through here at the moment.
No, I think, like I say, custom forms are great. They're very flexible. So as you start to think of good uses for them, let us know. We'd be happy to help you set them up. And if you have questions about this or any of the other modules, or if you see any webinars out there that you just want to learn more about and they aren't helpful, reach out to support and we'd be happy to get someone from the team to get together with you and kind of talk through stuff. So let us know what else we can do.
That sounds great. Thanks, Micah. And just a reminder for everybody else here, again, that documents, download documents is where you can find all past recordings. The one from today, we will send out in an email, likely later this afternoon here, along with the presentation that Micah used just for some guiding notes here. So we will get that sent out along with the survey that Micah referenced earlier. So in that survey, if you have any questions or maybe ideas on future topics that you'd really love to see a webinar around, feel free to put notes in there. We'd always like to hear those as well. With that, we'll go ahead and close up and we'll see you next month for our next KPay webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Bethany. Bye.